Story 1. The hitchhiker who never left the desert highway stretched into infinity, blacktop cutting through sand and stone like a scar. The only light came from the car's headlights, two pale cones piercing the night. For college friends, Ethan, Mia, Lucas, server halfway through their cross-country road trip, music low, conversation scattered. Midnight had settled in heavy, wrapping the car in silence. That's when they saw him. A figure stood by the side of the road, thumb raised stiffly in the classic hitchhiker pose. The man's clothes were ragged, an old flannel shirt, torn jeans, boots coated with dust. His face was hard to see, hidden in shadow beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Should we stop?" Mia asked, breaking the silence. "Hell no," Lucas muttered from the passenger seat. "It's the middle of nowhere. That's serial killer territory." But Ethan, ever the overly trusting driver, slowed down. "Come on, he looks stranded. We can give him a lift to the next town." Sarah bit her lip nervously. "I don't like this." Despite protests, the car rolled to a stop. The man climbed in silently, settling into the back seat beside Sarah. His smell hit them first, a mixture of dirt, gasoline, and something metallic, almost like blood. He said nothing as the car started moving again, his hat tipped low, hiding his expression. "Where are you headed?" Ethan asked after a few minutes, trying to break the tension. The hitchhiker didn't answer. Lucas turned around in irritation. "Hey buddy, you deaf or something?" The man slowly raised his head. His eyes caught the dim light, cloudy pale, like milk swirling in water. He gave a small smile, but it wasn't reassuring. It was thin, stretched too tight, as if he was unused to the gesture. "Just down the road," he whispered, voice like dry wind. The car grew colder, though the desert outside still baked under the lingering heat of the day. Sarah pressed closer to the door, her breath shallow. Ethan kept his focus on the road, trying not to shiver. After 20 miles, Ethan glanced at the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. He blinked, his stomach dropped. Sarah sat rigid, eyes wide, arms hugged tightly to her chest. "Where did he go?" Ethan whispered. Sarah shook her head violently. "He was right here. I didn't see him leave." Lucas laughed nervously, though it cracked in the middle. "Maybe he bailed while we weren't looking, opened the door and jumped out." But there had been no sound, no shift of air, no thud of feet hitting gravel. He had simply vanished. Minutes crawled by. Tension filled every inch of the car. Mia reached to turn the music back on, anything to break the suffocating quiet. The speakers hissed with static before cutting out completely. The GPS on Ethan's phone flickered, rerouted, then displayed only one word: turn back. Ethan slammed the phone down, stupid things glitching. Then came the whispers, faint at first, like wind slipping through a crack, but growing louder. Ethan thought it was the radio again until Sarah screamed. "He's in here," she cried. "I hear him." The whispers wrapped around them, slithering into their ears. Words they couldn't understand, muttered in a language too old to belong on a highway. Lucas spun around, eyes darting across the empty back seat. Nothing, but the air pulsed with presence, heavy and cold. Ethan pressed the gas harder. The car raced forward, but the headlights seemed weaker, swallowed by the endless desert. Sweat dripped down his forehead, though his hands were ice cold on the wheel. Then, without warning, the car sputtered. The engine coughed and died. They coasted to a stop in front of an abandoned gas station, its sign broken, windows dark. The building looked decades old, forgotten by time. "Perfect," Lucas muttered, voice shaking. "Just perfect." They got out cautiously. The desert night pressed close, suffocating, yet the four of them instinctively huddled together. Sarah's eyes were locked on the gas station. We shouldn't go in, but they had no choice. Inside, dust coated every surface. Shelves stocked with yellowed cans of food long expired. A single newspaper lay on the counter, pages curled with age. Mia picked it up with trembling fingers. The headline froze them all. "Local man killed in desert accident, body never recovered." Below the headline was a photo. The man in the hat, the hitchhiker, same cloudy eyes, same smile. The paper was dated 20 years earlier. Sarah backed away, whispering, "We picked him up. He sat next to me. He was in the car, he was real." A cold laugh filled the air, low and drawn out, vibrating through the floorboards. They turned toward the door. Standing outside, framed in moonlight, was the hitchhiker. His pale eyes gleamed as his hand raised, pointing directly at them. The door slammed shut. The last thing Ethan saw before darkness consumed the gas station was the man's smile widening, impossibly, until it split his face. By morning, the gas station stood empty again, silent as the desert. Their car was gone. The four friends were never seen again. Truckers whisper when they drive that stretch of road. Some say they see a shadowy figure with a hat standing by the roadside, waiting for a ride. Others claim to hear whispers inside their trucks, urging them to stop, but the wise ones don't. They keep driving, eyes fixed forward, never looking in the rearview mirror, because once you let the hitchhiker in, he never leaves. Story 2. The motel that doesn't exist. The rain had started hours ago, and the wipers were struggling against sheets of water that blurred the windshield. Claire and David had been on the road since morning, traveling cross-country for a long overdue vacation. What was supposed to be a fun adventure had turned into exhaustion and tension, as the endless backroads offered no towns, no lights, and no place to rest. "It's past midnight," David muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. "We'll stop at the next motel we see. No more pushing through." Claire nodded, her eyelids heavy. The GPS had lost its signal 2 hours earlier, leaving them blind in the storm. Every mile looked the same. Winding two-lane blacktop, trees bending under the weight of rain, darkness pressing in on all sides. Then, as if conjured from the shadows, a neon sign appeared through the mist. "Sunset Motel Vacancy." David exhaled in relief. Finally, the building looked old but welcoming, 2 floors of weathered siding, a flickering sign buzzing faintly, a row of dim porch lights casting halos through the rain. They pulled in, the tires crunching over gravel. A lone car sat in the lot, its windows fogged, its paint peeling. Inside the lobby, the smell of mildew lingered beneath a faint trace of cigarette smoke. A bell sat on the counter, and David rang it. An elderly man appeared from the back office, wearing a faded uniform with a name tag that simply read George. His face was pale, his hair slicked back in a style that seemed decades out of date. "Welcome to the Sunset," George said warmly, though his eyes never quite met theirs. "Traveling far, cross-country," David replied. "We just need a room for the night." George slid a dusty ledger across the counter. "Sign here." Claire hesitated. "You don't take cards." George chuckled. "We keep things simple here, cash only." Something about his tone unsettled her, but exhaustion outweighed unease. David paid, and George handed them an old brass key with the number 7 etched into it. "Second floor," George said. "Breakfast at 6 sharp." As they climbed the creaking stairs, Claire whispered, "Did you notice how he talked? Like we're in the 50s or something." David shrugged it off, but his grip on the key tightened. Room 7 smelled faintly of damp wood. The wallpaper was faded, patterned with flowers that had lost their color. The bedspread was worn thin. The television, an ancient box model. No Wi-Fi, no cell service. Claire collapsed onto the mattress with a groan. "I don't even care. I just want to sleep." But sleep didn't come easily. Around 2 a.m., Claire stirred awake to a sound, a muffled scream, faint but distinct, echoing through the thin walls. She sat up, heart pounding. "David," she whispered, shaking him. "Did you hear that?" He rubbed his eyes groggily. Probably another guest. Drunk, maybe. But then came footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate, passing their door, then stopping. The doorknob rattled. Claire froze, eyes wide, staring at the handle as it twisted once, twice, then went still. Whoever was outside didn't leave. She could feel them standing there, breathing, listening. After a full minute of silence, David jumped out of bed and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty. Only the old carpet stretched on, lamps flickering faintly, shadows pooling at the far end. "See," David said, though his voice cracked. "No one's there." They shut the door, but neither slept again. At dawn, they returned to the lobby. George was waiting, smiling too widely. "Sleep well?" he asked. Claire opened her mouth to complain about the noise, but something stopped her. George's smile didn't waver, but his eyes gleamed oddly as if daring her to mention it. "Fine," she said instead. They ate a bland breakfast of toast and watery coffee, the only guests in the dining room. David muttered that he couldn't wait to get back on the road. When they returned to the lot, the rain had stopped, but something was wrong. Their car was gone. In its place sat an identical model, same make and color, but rusted through, the license plate unreadable. The sight made Claire's stomach churn. "That's not our car," she whispered. George appeared suddenly behind them, though neither had heard the lobby door open. "Everything you need is here," he said calmly. "You don't need to leave." His smile stretched wider, too wide, revealing teeth, too straight, too perfect. Panic surged. David grabbed Claire's hand, pulling her toward the road. They ran, gravel crunching, lungs burning, but the road curved strangely, looping back toward the motel. Again and again, no matter which direction they fled, They ended up staring at the flickering Sunset Motel sign. The guests were waiting now. Figures stood in the windows of the second floor, pale faces pressed to the glass, all smiling the same stiff, unnatural smile. Shadows shifted behind curtains, whispering voices rising in a low chorus. Claire screamed. David dragged her inside the car, the rusted version of their own, and jammed the key into the ignition. Miraculously, the engine turned over. Gravel sprayed as they sped out of the lot, rain starting again in sheets. They didn't stop driving until the sun was high, the world around them alive again with towns and traffic and gas stations. Finally, at a rest stop, David pulled over. Both of them sat shaking, trying to catch their breath. Claire's hand brushed something cold in her pocket. She pulled it out, a brass key, room 7. She dropped it as if it burned her skin. Weeks later, curiosity overcame fear. Claire searched online for the Sunset Motel. She found an old article. Local motel destroyed in fire. All guests perish. The article was dated 1985. The accompanying photo showed the same building, the same flickering sign. The Sunset Motel had not existed for decades. Story 3. The Vanishing Highway. The minivan's headlights cut a pale tunnel through the night as the Harper family drove deeper into the countryside. The road stretched on endlessly, surrounded by black forests that seemed to swallow sound. GPS says this shortcut will save us an hour, Mark announced from the driver's seat, forcing cheer into his voice. His wife, Linda, frowned at the glowing screen. It's taken us off the main highway. Are you sure? Mark shrugged. It's just one of those back roads. We'll be fine. In the back seat, their 2 kids, Emma and Josh, were slumped against their seatbelts, drifting in and out of sleep. For the first hour, the road seemed ordinary enough. Narrow asphalt, no other cars, no streetlights. But gradually, a strange stillness settled over them. The forest pressed closer. No houses, no intersections, not even a deer crossing. And though the dashboard clock ticked forward, the odometer barely seemed to move. Linda shifted uneasily. Mark, how long since we saw a sign? Mark gripped the wheel tighter. Just a stretch of empty road. We'll hit a town soon, but they didn't. Hours passed. The fuel gauge never moved, stuck just above half. The same stars hung overhead, refusing to shift in the sky. Emma stirred awake, pressing her face to the window. Mum, she whispered, the trees look wrong. Linda leaned forward. She noticed it too. The branches weren't quite natural, twisting into shapes like bent arms, clawing at the sky. Then Josh sat up, voice trembling. There's a car behind us. In the rearview mirror, Mark saw headlights in the distance. Relief washed over him. Finally, someone else out here. But as the vehicle drew closer, his relief turned to dread. It was a van, the same color, the same make and model as theirs. And inside, through the windshield, he could see 4 silhouettes. Linda's breath caught. Mark, those people look like us. The van followed at a steady distance, headlights unwavering. No matter how fast Mark drove, it never gained, never fell back. Just a mirror image trailing them. Panic rose in his chest. He slammed the wheel, turning sharply onto a side road that appeared out of nowhere. Gravel sprayed as they skidded forward. When he glanced back, the other van had vanished. But the road ahead was worse. The landscape shifted unnaturally. One moment there were trees, the next barren fields of black soil, then skeletal mountains on the horizon. The road never ended, just unspooled like an infinite ribbon. Emma clutched her mother's arm. We're not supposed to be here. Linda tried to keep calm for the kids' sake, but her voice trembled. Mark, turn around, please, he obeyed, spinning the wheel. The van groaned as it swung back the way they'd come, but when the headlights illuminated the path ahead, their stomachs dropped. It wasn't the way back. It was the same stretch of road, stretching on and on. Josh whimpered. We can't leave. Mark pressed the pedal to the floor. Desperate, the engine roared. The speedometer climbed, but the scenery outside didn't change. Then, up ahead, twin headlights flared into view. Another vehicle barreled toward them. At first Mark thought it was another driver, but as it drew closer, his knuckles whitened on the wheel. It was the same van, their van, only this time it was coming directly at them. Inside, Mark saw himself behind the wheel, eyes hollow, mouth slack. Beside him sat Linda, face pale and twisted in fear. The kids were in the back, their small hands pressed against the glass. The doppelganger family stared back at them, wide-eyed, as the van sped toward collision. Linda screamed, "Stop!" Mark slammed the brakes. Tires screeched, the world jolted, and then, silence. The other van was gone. Breathing hard, Mark pulled onto the shoulder, though there was no real shoulder, just endless black soil. The family sat in trembling silence. Linda whispered, "We're not on Earth anymore." The words chilled Mark because they felt true. The sky looked wrong, the stars shifting in patterns no human could recognize. The air outside shimmered faintly, like heat waves. Suddenly, Emma pointed. "Look." Far down the road, figures stood in the headlights. 4 of them, a family. The shapes were indistinct, more like shadows than people, but they were arranged exactly like the Harpers to adults. To children, they didn't move, didn't blink. They only stared as the van idled. Then they began walking forward. Mark panicked, throwing the van into reverse. Gravel crunched, headlights swinging wildly. The shadow family advanced faster, their movements jerky, unnatural, as if the world itself skipped frames. "Dad!" Josh screamed. Mark spun the wheel, trying desperately to find an escape. But no matter which way he turned, the figures always appeared ahead of them, closer and closer, as if the road bent around their will. Finally, the van's headlights flickered and died. Darkness swallowed them whole. In that silence, something pressed against the glass from outside. Pale hands smeared against the windows. Faces leaned close, whispering. Linda clutched her children, sobbing. Mark held the wheel in a death grip. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices, identical to theirs, repeating words they couldn't understand. Then, all at once, the van jolted violently. A blinding white light filled every corner. The family screamed, and the road was empty again. Days later, a trucker reported something strange on his midnight haul. He swore he saw a minivan pulled to the side of the road, lights off, family inside. But when he slowed to check, the vehicle blinked out of existence, gone without a trace. Locals talk about that stretch of highway, the one that doesn't appear on any maps. Some say if you miss a turn, the road takes you, and if you're unlucky enough to find it, you may meet yourself coming the other way, but you'll never come back to tell the tale. Story 4. The stranger at the gas station. The fuel gauge hovered just above empty. Rachel cursed under her breath as her old sedan rattled down the lonely stretch of highway. Midnight had come and gone, and the desert around her stretched endless and silent. Just when she feared she'd be stranded, a flicker of fluorescent light appeared ahead. A gas station's mall, isolated, its sign buzzing faintly against the darkness. Relieved, Rachel pulled in. The lot was deserted except for a single pickup, its paint flaking, windshield coated in dust. Inside the station, the flicker of a television cast shifting shadows. She stepped inside. The air smelled of old oil and stale coffee. Behind the counter, a thin man in a grease-stained uniform looked up. His name tag read Tom. His eyes darted nervously toward the door before settling back on her. "You shouldn't be out here this late," he muttered. Rachel forced a smile, ran low on gas. "Lucky you're open." Tom didn't smile back. He leaned closer, his voice low and hurried. "Listen to me carefully. Fill your tank, then stay inside until sunrise. Don't leave, don't open the door for anyone." Rachel blinked. "What are you talking about?" Before he could answer, the bell above the door jingled. Another customer stepped in. He was tall, dressed in faded jeans and a plaid shirt, his skin pale under the fluorescent lights. But what caught Rachel's attention was his smile too wide, stretching across his face unnaturally, showing teeth that seemed too many, too sharp. His eyes locked on her. "Evening," he drawled, though his voice carried a strange echo. Tom stiffened behind the counter. His hand shook as he slid a pack of gum forward, pretending to look busy. Rachel forced a nod and backed away toward the coffee machine. The man's gaze followed her, unblinking. When she glanced up, he was already closer. She hadn't heard him move. "You headed far?" he asked softly, head tilting too far to the side. Rachel swallowed hard, just passing through. The man's smile widened. His lips cracked at the corners but didn't bleed. Tom's voice cut sharply. "Rachel, come here." Startled, she looked back. She didn't remember telling him her name. Tom's face was pale, eyes locked on the stranger. He whispered, "Stay behind the counter." Rachel obeyed, slipping behind the counter as the tall man drifted closer to the door, still grinning. The bell jingled as he stepped outside. Rachel let out the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. What the hell was that? Tom's hands shook as he fumbled for a shotgun hidden beneath the counter. Not a man. They come at night, they look human, but they're not. Rachel stared at him, disbelief warring with fear. "You expect me to believe that?" Tom's eyes burned with desperation. "Do you want to survive? Then listen to me. Whatever happens, don't open the door. Hours dragged. Rachel sat on a stool behind the counter, trying to ignore the pounding of her heart. The gas station clock ticked loudly, each minute stretching longer than the last. Then came the knocking. At first it was gentle, 3 taps against the glass door. Rachel froze. The knocking came again, louder this time. A voice followed, familiar, pleading, "Rachel, it's David." Open up. Her blood ran cold. David was her ex, hundreds of miles away. There was no possible way he could be here. Still, the voice was perfect. Same tone, same cadence. She turned to Tom, horrified. He shook his head violently. "It's not him. Don't answer." The voice grew louder, angrier. Knuckles slammed against the glass hard enough to rattle the door. "Rachel, open this door now." Her hands trembled. She wanted to cover her ears, but the voice burrowed inside her skull. Then, just as suddenly, silence. The minutes dragged again. Tom kept the shotgun aimed at the door, his face drawn and pale. But when the next sound came, it wasn't knocking. It was footsteps circling the building, dragging along the walls. Rachel imagined the stranger's too-wide smile pressed against the glass, waiting. At 3 a.m., the power flickered, the lights dimmed, shadows lengthening across the room. For a moment, Rachel swore she saw a silhouette inside the station, tall and still, just beyond the reach of light. She blinked, and it was gone. Tom's voice broke the silence, hoarse, almost dawn. "Just hold out." But Rachel's nerves were unraveling. Every second felt like hours, every shadow a threat. And then she heard it again, her name. This time, it was her mother's voice. Gentle, loving. "Rachel, sweetheart, it's me. Let me in." Her throat tightened. Her mother had been dead for years. Tears blurred her eyes as she staggered toward the door. Tom caught her arm. "No, that's what it wants." But the voice was so perfect, so warm. "Please, Rachel, open the door." Her hand hovered over the latch. The horizon bled faint light. Dawn was coming. As the first rays touched the windows, the knocking ceased. The air outside stilled. Rachel collapsed against the counter, shaking. Tom lowered the shotgun slowly, his eyes bloodshot but relieved. "You survived," he whispered. Rachel managed a weak laugh, tears streaking her cheeks. "That was real, wasn't it?" Tom nodded grimly. "Too real. They always come back though, always looking for someone who'll open the door." By the time the sun was fully up, the station looked ordinary again. Rachel's car was filled, ready to go. She thanked Tom shakily, clutching the keys in her hand. He gave her one last warning before she left. "Don't drive this road at night again. And if you ever hear someone you love calling from the dark, don't answer." Rachel nodded, but her heart sank, because as she climbed into her car and pulled onto the highway, the radio crackled to life, and from the static came her mother's voice. "Rachel, sweetheart, I'm still waiting." Story 5. The wrong turn into nowhere. The summer road trip had been going well, at least until Tyler suggested the shortcut. "Trust me," he said, grinning as he turned the wheel onto the narrow back road. "This'll save us an hour." His 3 friends, Jess, Marcus, and Haley, groaned in unison. They'd already been driving for 8 hours, the air sticky, the cooler empty of everything except melting ice. Jess leaned forward from the back seat, frowning. "That wasn't on the map," Tyler shrugged. "Probably just an old highway Google doesn't track." "Relax. Scenic route." But scenic wasn't the word. The road twisted endlessly, bordered by dense woods that pressed close on both sides. The sunlight dimmed unnaturally fast, as though dusk had fallen hours early. Haley shivered. "I don't like this. It feels wrong." Marcus laughed, trying to cut the tension. "You've been watching too many horror movies." But as the road curved again, the laughter died. Up ahead stood a town. It appeared suddenly, as if it hadn't existed a second before. Wooden buildings lined the narrow streets, their paint faded, their windows glowing with warm light. A sign at the entrance read simply, "Welcome to Ashwood." The group exchanged uneasy glances. "Never heard of it," Jess whispered. "Me neither," Tyler admitted, but his grin returned. "Maybe we found one of those hidden gems. Let's check it out." The streets were eerily quiet. People stood on porches, smiling politely as the car rolled by. Their clothes looked dated, like something from the 1950s. Men in suspenders, women in modest dresses, children clutching ragdolls. Every face wore the same smile. Too wide, too fixed. Tyler parked in the town square near a diner. "Come on, let's stretch our legs." Reluctantly, they followed him inside. The diner smelled of coffee and fried food, but the air was heavy. To still, the waitress behind the counter greeted them cheerfully. "Welcome, travelers. Sit anywhere you like." Her smile never wavered. Neither did the stares of the other patrons, every single one of them turning in perfect unison to watch the newcomers. Haley sat stiffly, whispering, "Something's wrong with this place." Jess nodded. "Notice how no one blinks." Marcus tried to joke, but even his voice was tight. "Maybe they just like us." The waitress brought pie without them ordering. "On the house," she said. "We've been expecting you." The words made Tyler freeze. "Expecting us," he repeated. The waitress just smiled wider. "Of course, Ashwood welcomes all who find it." When he asked for directions back to the highway, her head tilted unnaturally. "Leave? Oh no, dear. There is no leaving Ashwood." The group exchanged panicked glances. Tyler stood abruptly. "We're going now." But when they stepped outside, the street wasn't the same. The square stretched longer than before, buildings repeating themselves. The car sat where they left it, but beyond it, the road curved only to loop back into town. No matter which alley they turned down, they emerged again in the square. Marcus cursed. "We're trapped." The townsfolk had gathered now, forming a loose circle around them. Their smiles stretched impossibly wide, their eyes empty and dark. One man stepped forward, carrying a rusted sickle. His voice was calm, practiced. "You belong to Ashwood now, like all the others," Haley screamed. The four friends bolted for the car. Tyler fumbled with the keys, shoving them into the ignition. The engine roared to life. He slammed the gas, plowing through the circle of townsfolk. But when the car shot forward, the road stretched only to bring them back to the same square. Ashwood swallowed them again. This time, the townsfolk were closer. Their movements were no longer calm but jerky, too fast, too coordinated, as if controlled by a single will. The friends abandoned the car and ran into the woods. Branches clawed at their skin, shadows shifting in unnatural ways. No matter how far they ran, the glow of the town's lights always flickered ahead, drawing them back. Jess stumbled, gasping. "It's like the forest bends around us." Marcus pulled her up. "Keep moving," but it was useless. Within minutes they burst back into Ashwood, collapsing in the square. The townsfolk were waiting, tools in hand, smiles unbroken. The friends huddled together, trembling. Tyler shouted, "What do you want from us?" The man with the sickle stepped forward again. His voice was the same calm tone, like a teacher reciting a lesson. "You came here. That means you were chosen. Ashwood grows only when new blood feeds it." He raised the sickle high. The last thing Haley saw before darkness claimed her was the townsfolk closing in, chanting something ancient, their voices one. Days later, hikers found the group's abandoned car on the side of a backroad. The engine was cold, the doors unlocked, the belongings untouched. There was no trace of the friends themselves. Locals whisper about Ashwood, the town that isn't on any map. They say it appears only when the road chooses, luring travelers with promises of shortcuts. And once you enter, you never leave. Some claim to have heard faint music on the wind while driving that stretch of highway, or seen warm lights flickering through the trees. Those who are wise keep driving, because if you stop, you might just find Ashwood waiting for you. And if you find Ashwood, it will never let you go.